If we can please begin with a roll call, if you can state your names. Derek Benavides.
Here.
Troy Whittemore.
Here.
Ruben Obel. Abraham Golonsky. Aaron Rendon.
Here.
Vanessa Castillo. And Ronald Mills.
Here.
Thank you. Notice of a public meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Brownsville, teleconference open meeting. Pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5 of the Texas Government Code, the Texas Open Meetings Act, notice is hereby given that the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, has scheduled a regular meeting on Thursday, July 9th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. via WebEx teleconference meeting. You can join us online, or you can also call in with an access code. Members of the public who submitted a public comment forum will be permitted to offer public comments as provided by the agenda and as permitted by the presiding officer during the meeting. This is a regular meeting of 5:30 p.m. We will skip the Pledge of Allegiance and begin with item number 1, updates and comments.
Anything, Martine? Any new surprises for us?
So actually no new comments, just that we're still pushing forward and working with the consultant for our unified code, and just again pushing forward with the new normal. So that's about the only comment that we have right now.
Rick, do you have anything?
You're on mute. Just to point out, we have a couple of proposals for you tonight. Like our previous ordinance with the commercial zoning districts, we're hoping to streamline and facilitate the development process, and hopefully you'll see that here tonight.
Go ahead, Marina.
Okay. All right. Item number 2, approval of the minutes for the regular meeting on June 18th, 2020.
I'll make a
motion to. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Can we please make sure to mute our mics if we are not speaking? Who did the second?
Ron.
Mirna, stand by for a minute. Mr. Mills, I have you logged in twice, sir. I'm gonna go ahead and log you out once.
I already disconnected the machine. I'm on only one now. Go ahead.
All right, moving on to our public hearings. Public hearing and action, Idea Sports Park Subdivision, final plat.
Good afternoon, board members. Thank you for being with us here today. Appreciate your time. Staff has found that Hacienda West Subdivision is officially complete. We do need an action by the board to approve the plat.
I make a motion to find it complete.
I'll the motion to find it complete.
Who's the second?
Aaron.
I have a motion and a second to find complete. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Public hearing item number 2, public hearing and action, Hacienda West Subdivision, Section 11, final plat.
The Hacienda West Subdivision is already, if we can move on to the next item, please.
Yes, that's actually the one we acted upon just now.
Yes.
Idea Academy Sports Park Subdivision. We are not discussing because the subdivision is not ready, and that's also why, or the purpose why we're having the meeting on July 23rd to hear that specific subdivision.
Okay, so do I need to rescind, or will this change it?
Yeah, go ahead and redo it, Troy.
Okay, I rescind it, finding it complete.
All right. That sounded good. I'll second that again.
We need a vote on that?
No, Troy made a motion. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, so now we're on
Item
Hacienda
3.
West.
Should be on item 3.
So apologies for that.
Item
Item number 2, Hacienda West subdivision is complete, and that's where the motion needs to be made.
Correct, and it was.
Okay,
And we motion second and approved.
Great.
Okay, next item, please.
Okay, item 2, I made a motion to find it complete.
Correct. And I made a motion to second. And Derek and everybody approved. So that carried.
Okay.
Move on to the next item, please, Mariner.
Item number 3, public hearing and action to repeal and replace existing residential use district regulations in Chapter 348 zoning, Article 4 use districts in dealing with related matters.
Thank you, board members. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So before you today, like Mr. Vasquez mentioned, there's going to be some proposed changes to our residential ordinance, just like we saw with our commercial ordinance. Hopefully you do get to see that what we're trying to do is for the benefit of the city itself. And quickly on this slide, I'd like to make note of some of the goals that we have as per Texas Local Government Code regarding what the purpose of zoning is, some of the goals that we'd like to achieve, and that's to lessen congestion, secure safety from fire and other dangers, promote health and general welfare, provide adequate light and air, and so on. So at this point in time, staff feels that the current ordinance isn't doing the best job in promoting what Texas Local Government Code has for us and trying to achieve these goals. So we can go on to the next slide, please. So currently, I'm going to just briefly talk about what we have right now, and then later on, I'll move on to what's being proposed. So at this time, we have what are called use districts and area districts. It's under the umbrella of zoning. So 2 different columns here. So under use districts, that's what regulates the use itself, whether you have a single family residence, a commercial retail business, apartment use, or industrial use. Those are what the zoning itself is, regulating what uses are compatible with each other, which ones aren't. And then we also have an additional layer of regulations that are called area districts. So area districts regulate how a residence is built based on setbacks, density, height, and so on, different types of construction or regulations for the uses themselves. So you'll see that for dwelling, it's going to be also going to rely on area districts, setbacks, density, and so on. So just imagine each item going back and forth because they're required, and it can get kind of convoluted at times. But this is what we currently have. So if you have a dwelling, you got to go to area, and vice versa. And same goes for the commercial back before we made our revisions and proposed new changes and ultimately were approved. So we're not going to talk about commercial today. It's just strictly residential. But just to keep in mind, that's what we currently have. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So currently we have 3 residential zoning districts, which is dwelling district, dwelling retail, and apartment. Next slide, please. So these are the uses that are allowed in those specific zoning districts. So in the dwelling district, we have a single family use, which you see single family subdivisions, right? But at the same time, in those single family subdivisions, it's possible that maybe, you know, our neighbor or what have you can also have a duplex by right. So you get to see sometimes a house, duplex, or duplex. It's just different types of, two different uses are allowed under the dwelling district. So that's something to keep in mind. Currently, if you have, let's say, a 5,000 square foot lot in a residential subdivision of single family only, if for whatever reason my neighbor wants to buy the lot and then the next adjacent lot to that, he can build a duplex if he wanted to by right. And sometimes we see that in some subdivisions where it disrupts the character of the subdivision, and there's other times it doesn't, where it's just strictly also all duplexes. So that's, like I said, something to keep in mind later on when we discuss the proposed residential ordinances. So then moving on to dwelling retail, if you happen to be in a zone that's dwelling retail district, that means that you can have a single family use, or that you can also have a retail use adjacent to that property. So like a bakery, tortilleria, something that's strictly retail ice cream shop, something that's just in and out. So that's something that's compatible in the dwelling retail district. We don't see too many of those, but it is available in some areas to people to have retail uses next to single family. And then we just have strictly apartment district where it's only apartment uses. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. Again, feel free to interrupt me at any time. If you have any questions, the board can definitely speak and unmute themselves and ask me in case, because I don't want the board to forget a question they might have during any of these slides. So feel free to interrupt me. So going back to the zoning itself, I'm not going to do this for every single residential district that we just discussed, because it can get a little bit overwhelming. But just know for the dwelling district, if someone wants to come in a dwelling district, and they can choose to decide, well, I can either build a house or I can build a duplex. Based on that, then they have to go through that other layer that I just mentioned, which is called the area district, right? The setbacks, the height, the density. So it might vary from what the adjacent property is doing, or what the other person across the street has. So the property owner can decide, well, you know what, I want to build a bigger house, or I want to split my lot and build two little houses, or it might be a little bit it's not going to be in character with the area, not in character with the surroundings. So you'll see that you have your option for setbacks of J, H, E, G. So there you have 11 different options for the current residents developers to choose on how they like to build their single family or their duplex. Same goes for the retail uses that we discussed earlier, and it actually used to be the same way for apartments before we discussed that with the commercial ordinance. So going on onto the next slide, please. You'll see that these are, like I mentioned earlier, the current area districts, different options. So just imagine someone wanting to build a house and trying to decide what setbacks they're going to use, what type of housing they're going to use, and it also might not be in character with the other single family lot sizes that are there. So if you can move on to the next slide. So this is what it looks like when staff presents the options to developers as far as what they're able to do, right? You have a house option or the duplex option, depending on your size of lot that you want, and that's going to dictate your setbacks. So you see that it's not the most friendly chart that we have to offer to our residents and to our developers. It can become a little difficult. It's why we see so many different uses. Nothing really is consistent. Unless specifically there's a subdivision with 50 lots and they're all one specific area district. But then again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record. There's nothing to keep that property owner from building a duplex or just changing the areas district to a different letter. So if we can move on to the next slide. like I said, yeah, these are the area districts, and go ahead and move on. So what staff is proposing is to eliminate area districts from the residential ordinance, just like we did with the commercial. And what we're proposing is 6 different residential ordinances or districts that dictate the setbacks themselves, and there's not going to be an additional layer of area districts or additional layer of restrictions. The district will dictate itself what the setbacks are going to be, what the regulations are going to be, and it's going to be the same throughout. So anytime someone wants to say, you know what, I want to build a single family subdivision, here you go. This is going to be your R1 district, and those are the regulations you're going to follow, and that's that. And that's something that's going to have to be followed even throughout the process after the subdivision is built out. So we're also introducing what's called the single family residential estate district for bigger sized lots. That's basically what you're going to see. And I'm going to go through each one. Right now, we don't have this type of district. Everything for the most part is dwelling that allows a duplex and residential, but with the estate, we're allowing subdivision lots, subdivision property, single family lots to be a little bit bigger, and we're going to keep it that way. Same goes for residential. I'm sorry, residential itself, again, it's going to have its own requirements. Single family estates for bigger size lots. Now moving on to the duplex residential district. That's no, if you can stay on, thank you. The duplex residential district, that's strictly for duplexes. We've seen in cases where we have single family subdivisions, and by a property owner coming in and developing duplexes, and maybe 1 or 2 out of those, let's just say 50 single family lots, it does disrupt the character of the single family subdivision. Now, if there happens to be an area that's majority of duplexes, then that would be given the duplex residential R2 district designation. We also don't have currently a residential townhouse or condominium district. That's something that staff is introducing for developers. If that is something that is maybe being thought about, we would designate it as a townhouse or condo district with its own requirements. Now, something that's very interesting that we currently don't have, but that we're also proposing, is what's called a planned development district. And that means that the developer can basically come and ask for permission to the Planning and Zoning Commission to develop a district with setbacks of their own proposal, with uses of their own proposal, and introduce that to the board, and the board can in turn give feedback and approve or deny that request. That's something that gives wiggle room to the applicant for maybe a large project or something that involves different uses, where they can have one section of an area be single family, and then maybe another towards the front of a major street be commercial, and maybe towards the back they like to have townhouses. So if it's a large development, this is where a planned development would work perfectly with the developer, so they're able to move in with that to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it just be a one big development and one big district without those requirements that were approved by P&Z, and when it will also be noted on the plat. And lastly, we have the apartment district, and we're leaving that there. Any questions at this time?
Yeah, a couple. First one is this going to be for all new development, and this not going to be incorporated into the city as it is now, or are you guys going to find a way to kind of blend it, or what are you going to do?
Correct. So we're working on blending it at this moment. It definitely will be for new development, and the ordinance itself that we're proposing does state that for new areas, you're going to have to follow these specific guidelines, these regulations, depending on what district you're given. Now, if the ordinance does say that maybe there's in a part of town where setbacks are maybe different and it's too convoluted, and there's a section in the ordinance that does say that you're able to find an average of what's there. So we're making some areas for new construction, right? Not just exactly follow what is being proposed, but we're looking at the average of the block length. We're also looking at maybe making some uses that are non-conforming, if there's an apartment complex and close or adjacent to single family areas, and there's no other apartment complexes where we would maybe make those non-conforming. But it's something that staff is looking at this moment.
And then your planned development, that would be something, I know Mr. Vasquez has just come down from, say, the Dallas area. So like the first floors or the lower levels would be retail, nightclubs, bars, and then the upper levels would be townhouses, apartments, that kind of thing. Is that kind of what you're looking at there?
You're thinking of more of a mixed use development, like I don't know, an actual structure, but think of that as far as like an area of land. So if they wanted to have a section strictly for residential use, and then maybe on the other side make townhouses, they're able to make that all into one and bring that before the board, as opposed to zoning each individual section that they're going for.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Alan.
Rick, did you want to say something? You're muted.
We've tackled the mixed-use development in our commercial district rewrite, so we can allow mixed-use development under the current commercial districts. For the planned development district, you would have a mix of residential uses. So if somebody wants to build a residential subdivision and one block is traditional single-family detached garage homes, the next row or next block could be townhomes. The next block could be zero lot lines. But we're able to do all that under one zoning district called the PD district, and that plan development and the plan would have to come to the Planning Commission for review and approval, and then that would go to City Council for final review and approval. But it gives us much more flexibility in being able to mix up the types of residential uses in one development. That tool we don't have right now.
All right, thanks.
Next slide, please. So just going into the actual regulations and now what the requirements would be. Like I mentioned earlier, there's no area setbacks. This is going to be the new standard for all residential uses regarding new construction. And for areas that are already developed, we're going to tackle those on a case-by-case basis. But for the most part, the ordinance does say that we have some wiggle room for them to not burden them with an area that they can't work with. So the first one, the single-family residential R1 district, the only use that you're going to be able to have is a single-family residence, so that you don't have to worry about a duplex coming in and disrupting the character of the area. Your requirements is 25-foot front yard setback, 3.5 on the side and rear, and all you need is a lot size of 5,000 square feet to half an acre. And that's just what it is. You're not going to have A, B, C, D, 11 different types of single-family construction. That's just what's going to happen. That's what we're proposing for the new single-family residential district. Next slide, please. And for the single-family residential estate district, we also are only going to allow single-family residential use. The setbacks at 40 feet in the front yard, 10 feet on the side and rear, and we're just asking for a lot size of half an acre and up. So this will restrict people from cutting up to their sizes in areas that have large lots and developing little smaller houses. So it just protects the character of an estate. Moving on to the R2 district, the duplex residential district. This is where we would allow strictly duplexes and the single family residences. So if you have an area that's a majority of a duplex subdivision, there's times there's the house on a lot, or there happens to be where there's more mixed use of a duplex and a residential. Because it's a higher use, the duplex is permitted, but also would allow for a single family residence to be in a duplex zone. Now note that in an R1 zone, you can have a house, but you can't have a duplex. But in an R2 zone, you can have a duplex and a house. So this is just to create and protect a single family in the R1, and in R2, it allows for both different uses. The setback is 25 in the front or in line with the average, and 3.5 on the side and rear. And depending on the lot size, that would just be on what is majority of the area there of established subdivision. If not, it would just be no setback, or no, sorry, no lot size requirement. Next
You
slide, thank you.
said 3.5 feet on the side or 5.5?
3.5.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, the board can make suggestions to staff regarding these districts. Next slide, please. So earlier I mentioned we want to introduce the townhouse and condominium districts. This is something that we currently don't see too much of, but hopefully we do give an option to developers. Now we're looking at a 10 front setback that or in line with the average, but again, we won't see too many of the average because there's not that many already here. A 0 side yard setback with a firewall, and the minimum lot size is 2,000 square feet, and it allows townhouse and condominiums only. Next, we have the plan development, as we discussed earlier, and we allows different types of uses of different residential uses that the board can look at and review. As Mr. Vasquez mentioned earlier, you can have different types of single-family residential, and then on the other side have townhouses or condos. This is basically a large project that gives the developer wiggle room for the board to look at and review and approve or deny. Like it says in the bottom, those is strictly set by P&Z. Next, we have the apartment district. It only allows apartment uses, and there are no area requirements. There are no setback requirements. This is strictly that is going to be regulated by the landscaping ordinance, the parking requirement, fire, building code, and utilities are going to be constructed on site. And those are things that we're also we're tying the apartment district similar to what we did with the commercial ordinance. We're following the same guidelines for the apartment district. And based on that information, staff recommends approval of the residential ordinance amendments. I'm available for any questions at this time.
Thank you, Alan. Anybody have any comment? I needed a motion.
Yeah, I got one real quick question. This is Derek Benoist. So this is essentially we're trying to get rid of all these charts and different zoning situations. If you've got a new subdivision that's going to be going up, it's going to be zoned, R1 or whatever it was, R, and the residents there are not going to have to be worrying about whether duplexes are going to be popping up left and right. That's essentially, that is what the ultimate goal is for moves like this, correct?
To an extent, yes, we're keeping the character of the single family subdivision intact. So if for whatever reason someone near you wanted to build a duplex, it would have to be rezoned as opposed to just coming into the planning department and asking for a building permit to build a duplex.
Yeah, Alan, I would also add that that is absolutely correct, that we are trying to build in predictability for property buyers so that when they're making their decision to move into a particular subdivision, they know it's going to remain single family, or if they're buying into a duplex district, the buyer will know it's either going to be a duplex or a single family, and the same thing with townhomes and apartments. So we're building in adjacency predictability, which is important to the buyers. At the same time, we're consolidating our area and use zone, so we're streamlining for our developers so they have an easier path forward with their projects.
Gotcha. And have you guys gotten some feedback from developers, builders that this is going to be helping their industry? Have we gotten feedback on that?
We haven't taken public comment other than the public comment here tonight. If the commission feels that there's a need to have further input from the industry, we certainly could take a step back and reach out to them and place this back on your agenda. But we think that the streamlining and the elimination of the shopping of the area districts is going to be well received by the development community.
Yeah, no, I think I agree that it's to me, I'm not a builder, but to me, it sounds and looks like everything that what the builders would want. I'm just saying that if, they're the ones that are going to be the ones that are doing it, maybe for the future, it'd be great if we were able to get some feedback from those industries that we are affecting, to get some feedback from them of just, is this in the right direction? Because of course, looking at something on paper, it makes sense to all of us, but when you're actually got your boots to the ground and you're the one that's actually having to do it, if it's not truly making things easier, well then we might be hindering that process. But I think this is heading in the right direction, and it's definitely an improvement. But just a recommendation, maybe for the future of stuff like this, of just getting some of that industry feedback. That way we get that we get that input as well. So thank you though.
We'll do that.
Okay. Anybody else? All right,
I
gentlemen.
just like to quickly point out that this is a project that was led by staff, but also through city commission. So I believe our current regulations are the ones that are getting the most negative feedback. So that's why we're looking at making some changes here. But other than that, I don't have any more comments, but I still can answer some questions by the board.
Sure.
Yeah, if there's nothing else, this is Derek. I'll make a motion to approve.
And this is Ron. I second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, board members. Appreciate it.
Public hearing item number 4. Public hearing and action to repeal and replace the existing sidewalk regulations in Chapter 320, Planning and Development, Article 2, Sidewalk Facilities, Chapter 322, Subdivisions, Section 332.167, Sidewalk Requirements, and dealing with related matters.
Yes, good evening, board members. This is Georgina Lopez. I'm a planner development specialist, and I'd like to present this Brownsville Sidewalk Ordinance, pedestrian friendly.
Georgina, hold on just a second. Before we start, I want to share some information with the commission regarding this particular project. The reason that we're here and why we're presenting this sidewalk ordinance amendment to you is, one, the existing sidewalk framework is convoluted and confusing. It shows up in 4 different sections of the city's code with different definitions, different terminology, different standards. And it also shows up in the engineering department standards and specifications requirements. And once again, it has different language and standards. And so for our developer builder community, or for someone that's trying to enter the market, navigating our sidewalk requirements is a challenge. So in addition to that, there was a project, a development project on West Morrison Road that involved sidewalks. And the project became mired in controversy surrounding what size of sidewalk should be installed. And the owner of the property made the decision to downzone his property from commercial to residential. And you folks may remember that zoning case. For some reason, at the city commission meeting, the zoning hearing turned in more to a sidewalk discussion rather than a land use discussion. And the question was, to the developer was that if the city commission approved his zoning, would he install a 10-foot wide sidewalk? And this was last year or sometime. I went back and witnessed the video, and there were actually two conversations taking place. The city commission, then Mayor Martinez, is it? Or yeah, Mayor Martinez was saying that the developer would be required to install a 10-foot sidewalk, and everyone would feel comfortable if he agreed to that and approve his zoning. Well, everywhere else in the state of Texas, conditioning zoning is not considered legal. You can't require a condition on zoning unless it's a specific use permit or a planned development. Then you're entering a development negotiation process and you can place conditions. But when you don't have that situation, when you have a standard zoning case, the standards should already be in place and you're merely moving from one zoning district to the other. Well, the developer in this particular case, when he was speaking to the city commission, he said, I'll install what is required. And so there was this back and forth conversation about you'll install a 10-foot sidewalk, and then the developer saying, I'll install whatever is required. So as the developer received his zoning approval and the property was down zoned residential, he started the land development process and his subdivision plat. Well, the subdivision ordinance says that a 5-foot sidewalk is required, and the engineering standards and spec say a 5-foot sidewalk is required. So the developer followed the requirements of the subdivision ordinance and the standards and specifications, which is a 5-foot wide sidewalk. And the conversation that was held before the city commission related to the zoning case and a 10-foot sidewalk became an issue of which is the requirement and what were the commitments made verbally. And so we're smack in the middle of that dispute right now. And so that's why this ordinance is here, to try to eliminate some of the confusion that's taking place within our current regulatory framework and establish a uniform set of definitions, a uniform set of standards, a uniform set of procedures. And regardless of whether you're going through the zoning code or the building code or the subdivision code or the engineering specifications, we're all working with the same set of definitions and standards. I'm a little concerned about the comment in the previous item about reaching out to the development industry, because this, by tightening up on these rules and having a single set of a single sidewalk regulatory framework, that it will have cost implications. And so as you review the ordinance here in a few minutes, if the commission is uncomfortable moving forward with this particular ordinance, I would rather take the time to get it right and go out to the development community and get feedback and then come back to the commission. But let's go through the ordinance as Georgina will now present. She did a great job on the ordinance. It's comprehensive. It solves a lot of the problems that we have with the current fragmented sidewalk regulatory system. And it mirrors what you see in most other places. And there, we can vary on the standards and so forth, but the structure itself will create a lot more predictability for our development community, subdividers in particular, so that the rules are in black and white. They know what the process is going in. They know what's going to happen on the other side. And I think this draft ordinance achieves that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Georgina and let her go through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Okay, next slide. Okay, on the agenda this evening, we have goals and purpose, current sidewalk ordinance, sidewalks in Brownsville, current sidewalk deficiencies, who builds and pays for sidewalks, sidewalk installation comparison, advantages for property owners, our current subdivision sidewalk regulations and cross-references, proposed sidewalk ordinance. So next slide. So this is what we want to accomplish, sidewalk ordinance goals. The city recognizes the need to promote and protect a pedestrian-friendly environment, the necessity to connect to essential services, health, recreational uses, dining, and retail is critical to the continued smart growth and economic viability of the city. We want to promote both safety and convenience for the residents, and attract tourism and activities through the use of properly maintained network of sidewalks, existing and future infrastructure. Next slide. Our current sidewalk ordinance, well, their requirements are not clear. Guarantee installation is not in place. 4-foot wide sidewalks are built. It allows for proposed or potential installation, and there are variances that can be granted easily. Next slide. So our current sidewalk regulations can be found in Chapter 320, Planning and Development, Article 2, Sidewalk Facilities. And there are several sections there: the design, newly developed areas, redeveloping areas, existing developed areas, sidewalk plan, and special provisions. Next slide. So let me talk about our current sidewalks in Brownsville. You can see there are gaps. Sometimes sidewalks are narrow. Sidewalk width standards are not consistent with traffic speed and traffic volumes. Next slide. So let me show you a couple of slides with sidewalk deficiencies. On this slide, you can see a sidewalk accessible route to a bus stop is severely disrupted. Next slide. This slide shows no compliant curb ramp along the perimeter of Puget Elementary. There are severely cracked sidewalks. Where is the safe route to schools? Next slide. In this slide, you can see a curb ramp is not provided at the corner of a new school campus, and we need to provide connections to residential neighborhood and apartments that are close by. Next slide. This slide shows a crosswalk with one semi-functional curb ramp. The curb ramp across the street is completely covered by grass, and you can see that there's a curb ramp there because the curbs slide downward. So there's something on the other side. Next slide. An accessible route to the building entrance definitely does not have the correct slope, and it provides a dangerous incline toward the frontage. Next slide. This slide shows that there are many businesses with missed opportunities in connecting sidewalks, curb ramps to nowhere. Next slide. This slide shows an existing tree in the middle of existing sidewalk. And if you notice on the across the street, there's no sidewalk on the other side. Next slide.
Welcome to Brownsville.
Okay, so again, this shopping center with ramps to nowhere at the corners, there's missed opportunity for connection there. Next slide. Restaurant with ramps to nowhere again at the corners. Next slide. This new development, the continuity of existing sidewalk is disrupted by new townhomes along FM 802. Next slide. This slide shows new apartments, and sidewalk does not provide a curb ramp at the corner. Next slide. This slide shows an Eagle Drive and Price Road. New crosswalk signals have been installed, but the detectable warning is covered by debris. Next slide. So who builds and who pays for sidewalks? First of all, who builds? Residential developers, builders, commercial developers, and industrial park developers. But who pays? The home buyers, renters, and tenants. Next slide. So this is a sidewalk installation comparison. If sidewalks were installed during subdivision development, cost of sidewalk is distributed evenly throughout development, funded with the sale of lots. Installation on a bare site entails less corrective measures. Infrastructure is installed simultaneously: drainage, streets, curbs, sidewalk, and fences, landscaping, irrigation, and trees can be planned to fit curb ramps and sidewalks. If installed after development, costs are handed down to the property owner. Installation on already developed site is significantly higher, so there's a need to retrofit existing drainage and street infrastructure, and removal and repositioning of fences, landscaping, irrigation, and trees in order to install curbs and sidewalks. Next slide. So advantages for property owners during subdivision development. There's a lower cost of sidewalk is included in the purchase. The street and yards are not disturbed. You get a sense of neighborhood feel, a physical separation from vehicles, encourage walking, and provide children a more secure place for activity. If installed after development, it increased cost to build. There's substantial disturbance to already developed infrastructure, traffic, and pedestrians. Absence of a sidewalk and curb ramp allow for vehicles to wrongfully park, and non-existing sidewalks lessen walking safety. Next slide. Our current sidewalk subdivision regulations can be found in Chapter 332, the Subdivision Ordinance. Article 4, Standards, Sidewalk Requirements. We want to clear up this section. So the bulk of the sidewalk ordinance will be embedded in this, this ordinance here. Next slide. We'll provide cross-references in these following chapters. Chapter 18, which deals with the building code, section 18:122. Chapter 320, planning and development. And chapter 348, zoning, article 7, supplementary district regulations. Next slide. So in a snapshot, this is what the proposed sidewalk ordinance entails. Installation of sidewalks is required. Sidewalk widths are mandatory. Sidewalk width increases as traffic speed and volume increases. There's a subdivision plat sidewalk agreement and financial guarantee. There are sidewalk plan information requirements, sidewalk easements, sidewalk and driveway apron design regulations, mailbox and sidewalk regulations, and sidewalk waivers, not variances. So next slide. So we're here to go ahead and ask if, do you want to go ahead and look at the actual sidewalk ordinance?
Thanks, Georgina. I think we're tonight to, as the prior ordinances, work through the public hearing and the review of the ordinance. If the commission is ready to move forward, we can do that. Or if the commission would like to take more time, we certainly can table the item and bring it back, whatever the commission's wish is here tonight.
Just one thing, Rick, I guess my question is, I know lately that the city has taken upon itself to install a lot of sidewalk in Brownsville, significant amount of sidewalk in Brownsville. How is that going to marry into the fact that in this plan, and it's always been in the plan, but now they're being more direct with it, that mandates developers to put in their sidewalks? How is that going to impact the city's plans, where they're trying to go? Because I'm really lost in where they're trying to go, because they're putting in sidewalks some places, I think, okay, whatever, and other places it's really needed. So how is that going to work? I mean, what's the goal?
Right. So let me give the broad perspective what's happening to sidewalks in cities across the state. Historically, most city charters included a provision that said property owners are responsible for repairing and installing sidewalks. And what communities have found is that just doesn't happen. And so cities across the state are starting to amend their charters, and cities are taking on the responsibility for repairing and replacing, not necessarily building new sidewalk in, certainly not in residential neighborhoods, but in the commercial districts. The cities will use grant funds to install sidewalks. We will appeal to TxDOT to provide sidewalks along the highway and along major arterial roadways. However, we're competing with all the other cities within the MPO or the in TxDOT's service area. So there's not a lot of grant money out there available for sidewalks. We can use some of our community development block grant funds for sidewalks in those low-income census tracts, and some cities elect to do that. What the city has been working on here is trails, not necessarily sidewalks. And so most of the trail projects have been developed with some bond money, but also some grant money. And the idea is that you want to have an integrated trail network with a sidewalk network. The trails are primarily recreational. Hopefully you can get some mobility benefit out of them and the ability to move people But the sidewalk network is actually an alternative mode of transportation to vehicles. And younger populations are looking for communities that are connected by sidewalks where they can leave their home and get to a corner retail center and grab a coffee or a beer. And this ordinance, I think, is designed to address Brownsville's sidewalk gaps over the next 50 to 100 years. And those gaps will fill in as redevelopment takes place or new development takes place. I don't think that the city will ever be in the financial position to replace the private sector's role in the construction of sidewalks.
Right. Okay. All right. Because ever since I've lived here, I've always made comment that the reason there's so many cars on the street in Brownsville is because there's no way to walk anywhere. I mean, there are no sidewalks in Brownsville. And so everyone drives when they could easily walk. So
And, one of the problems with the current ordinance that I don't fully understand is this idea that you only have to have a 4-foot sidewalk. Well, that standard applies in a residential neighborhood that may be a very small street with very little traffic.
Right.
And our same standard applies to Boca Chica or to Morrison Road and to the expressway. And
Right.
I think that's a disconnect.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments of the group?
No. I make a motion to close the hearing.
Yeah, so what are we, I'm sorry, we can close public if you need to.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
I'll make a second to close public.
All right. Thank you. All in favor?
And can we make,
Aye.
can we make, Rick,
So-
can we make a motion to approve? Or it's only for discussion?
Oh, you
What
can
is it exactly that we are looking to approve is because I'm a little confused as to what we're approving.
Correct. And I would agree with that, Rick, in that she did an excellent job. I enjoyed the presentation, but we haven't really seen what you guys are expecting it to say. So is that kind of in reference to your comment before what Derek was talking about getting developers' input? Is that kind of the goal? And then we can come back and make a final approval or what?
We had the draft ordinance in your packet. It was included
Right.
in the email. So the text and the standards and the procedures are all there that we're proposing in our draft ordinance. The commission can decide to take time to review that document if that's necessary. The commission can direct us to go out and get some industry feedback and bring that back to you before you take a formal action, or the commission can take a formal action this evening. It's up to the commission.
Chairman, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yeah.
This is Rick
Yes.
Cardin. I'm
Yeah.
a developer in Brownsville, Texas, Chairman Mills. And I'm one of the bigger developers in this town. And if not, this is the first I hear about this. And I think it's imperative that whoever is doing all this, reach out to the developers, the people that it's affecting the most before you all take any action. As a matter of fact, the way I read the agenda item, it didn't seem like you were going to take, that this is not something permanent. I think you were just looking at it. Okay. To be honest with you, I think y'all are ramrodding this thing without any input from the developers who are affected the most by this. And I saw that young lady's presentation on sidewalks, and it's skewed. Let me tell you, she took pictures of stuff. I mean, anybody, cracked sidewalks, that can happen anywhere, anyhow. Okay. I mean, I can go across town and find areas where there's decent sidewalks. Okay. She went out and just looked at bad stuff. And I understand there needs to be some improvements, but there has to be input from the developers. You know, one question that comes to mind right away is, how do you all expect us to put the sidewalks in when we don't know where the driveways are going on these lots? You know, some of these lots are only 50, 60 foot wide. A driveway is 20 foot. So you're telling me we're going to have to be putting in sidewalks that a third of the sidewalk may be pulled out, or will be pulled out? It just doesn't make any sense. And I tell you what, they need to reach out to developers, and we need to have a workshop together. If we truly are going to work together in this, then let's do it. But right now, it seems like it's one-sided.
Okay, Rick. Thank you for your input. All right.
Thank you.
And that kind of ties into what Derek was asking earlier, I think, too. in that his belief was that we should get some more public input. So based
Yeah.
on, go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, no, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mills. And yeah, it is. It's because like stuff, and I know I've taught, I deal with a lot of developers, and it's stuff like this that's going to end up affecting them. And as we are in a single family housing crisis here in Brownsville right now, we don't have enough inventory. Not only should we be, do we need to make sure that we're aware of what our locals, but the local builders, but we got to make sure that we're being open to business and keeping the businesses, keeping them building their subdivisions out here. So, and that was the reason why I mentioned that earlier on the last thing. And so, like on something like this, my gosh, yeah, it's if we, I know, one of the biggest complaints that developers have had over the years has been the impact fees. It seemed like we tried to make some headway on that a couple of years back or last year. I think we made some improvements, but on something like this, I agree. Let's, and I like the idea of a workshop because that gives an open platform to, invite the builders that are active, come out. Hey, give us your input. You guys are the ones with the boots to the ground. Give us your input, and let's see what works. And then at that point, we would then be able to put together something that's going to be that's going to be a happy median for everybody. So yeah, I would love to see a workshop and invite the local builders and have the city there. I would love to be there as well. And maybe even invite city commission, however way you guys want to work it. But that would be my suggestion. And from the beginning, I'm glad. Thank you so much, Mr. Rick, for acknowledging that. Because yeah, I was going to wind up asking if we would be able to table this till at least next month after we have some kind of conversation.
Okay, Derek, thank you. So with that in mind, you want to make that a motion, Derek? Table it
Yeah,
till-
I will. I'll make a motion to table this for next month, and that the city would organize a workshop before then.
And if Derek, if I can modify that, if we table it, it should come on next month. I would think that maybe it'll take the department longer than that to get together everything and have an actual legitimate meeting. So I would just say that we table it and it would be brought back on the agenda once a public forum has been conducted.
Yeah, if we can make a motion like that, that way it gives we're not so much on a time frame to really make a huge change this quick. Yeah, I would make that motion to bring it back on the agenda once we've had a workshop and come to a happy medium.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Ruben. I'd like to second that motion.
Okay. So I have a motion from Derek and a second from Ruben. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas, and also Rick Vasquez for your input. Thank you. Mirna,
The
what
next
else?
item is adjournment.
Well, then, gentlemen.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Derek Benavides.
I'll second Derek's motion. Aaron Rendon.
Okay, so we have Aaron and Derek making a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for participating.